This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. We start today's show by talking with people from the current KARL class. Adam York, Kari West, Andrea Krauss, Mark Palen, and Eli Svaty say what Kansas agriculture means to them to celebrate Ag Day. Jaymelynn Farney, K-State Beef Systems Specialist, continues the show, explaining how crabgrass, which is often considered a weed, can be effectively used as an alternative cattle forage. K-State Dairy Specialist Mike Brouk discusses the importance of having a standardized milking procedure to end the show. He says that it makes it easier to train new employees and reduces the stress on the cows. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and I would like to start our Tuesday show by saying Happy Ag Day. And to celebrate, we're joined by people in the KARL class who are currently in Spain. And we start off our conversation with Adam York, who's with the Kansas Sorghum Producers. Adam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Adam, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in agriculture?
Yeah, I grew up in southwest Kansas on a wheat and cattle operation, went to Kansas State University, and then worked on ag policy in the U.S. Congress, working in the Kansas delegation, but have been back in Kansas now for about half a decade, working in the sorghum industry, of which Kansas certainly has a vital stake in that crop.
And what do you do with the Kansas Sorghum Producers?
So I serve as CEO to the Kansas Sorghum Producers Association. I work with a board of dedicated producers as well as farmers throughout the state and the region, really providing leadership and staff support in advancement of the crop.
As someone who grew up in Kansas and came back to Kansas, what does Kansas agriculture mean to you?
Kansas agriculture is all about stepping up and stepping in to fill the void. I think through the KARL program, there are 30 of us who are strangers together, that we shared experiences and got to know each other and ultimately learned the capabilities of each other, as well as ourselves. And I think that's what Kansas agriculture is all about, stepping up and stepping in.
As you spend time with other people in your position, Adam, what would you like to tell other people in agriculture or rural communities?
I would say it's right back to that of if there's a void in your rural community that needs to be filled, or in your agricultural network, maybe you're the one to do it, to jump in and step in and ensure that the job ultimately gets done.
Next from the KARL class, we're joined with Kari West from Evergy. Kari, can you share with us a little bit about your involvement in agriculture?
Sure. So I have a diverse background. My husband and I, for more than 20 years, have owned and operated a small commercial cow-calf operation just south of Girard. I grew up on a diversified livestock farm in southeast Kansas. We also raised all of our own feedstock.
And so with that diversification and growing up in agriculture, what does it mean to you?
So what it meant to me growing up the way I did in agriculture in Kansas is pretty simple. It's in my blood, but it also provided me with the stepping stones for who I am today. It taught me skills like hard work and sacrifice, becoming compassionate, and learning the importance of understanding and working with others where they're at to help tell agriculture's story.
Kari, we mentioned that you work at Evergy, and what do you do with Evergy?
I'm a customer solutions manager, and what that means is I work with our large industrial commercial customers as well as our small rural communities throughout southeast Kansas and southwest Missouri.
And Kari, rounding out our conversation with you, what would you like to tell other people in agriculture or rural communities looking forward?
I would say get involved, find a way to become engaged, because most importantly, our communities aren't going to succeed if we're not actively participating, learning, and bringing back ideas to rural Kansas.
Kari, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us a little bit about what agriculture means to you.
All right. Thanks, Shelby.
The next person from the KARL class, we are now joined by Andrea Krauss, who's with the John O. Farmer Incorporated. Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in agriculture?
I grew up in a farming and cattle operation based in Russell and Thomas counties. And my husband is now farming and ranching with my father.
And so what does your family's operation now look like?
Looks like a diversified crop operation and purebred and commercial cow-calf herd.
So what does Kansas agriculture mean to you, Andrea?
Well, Kansas agriculture has been good to my family. It's provided us a career and financial support. It paid for my college, and it continues to feed my family and feed the world.
And Andrea, we mentioned that you're with John O. Farmer Incorporated, and can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you do there?
Okay, I'm a treasurer, controller of the company, and it's a oil and gas exploration and production company based in Russell with wells throughout the western half of the state.
As we're thinking about agriculture and rural communities, what would you like to share with people that are in the industry or in those parts of the state?
Well, from the standpoint of living in a rural community, I learned a long time ago that if you want your rural community to survive, you need to step up and do what it takes to move the community forward. There is no magic bullet. There's nobody that's going to come in and save your community for you. You've just got to come up with your own ideas and put them into action and grow from within the community.
Andrea, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and help us celebrate Ag Day.
Okay, thank you, Shelby.
Once again, being joined by someone else from this KARL class, we're now joined by Mark Palen from the AGCO Corporation. Mark, as we're thinking about National Ag Day, can you share with us your involvement in agriculture?
So I work at AGCO Corporation, which is a manufacturer of farm tillage and planter equipment. So I'm kind of on another end of agriculture where I help, with the production of the equipment that's needed to get our crops in the ground.
And Mark, did you grow up in agriculture or did you find your way towards agriculture?
So I grew up in Beloit, which is a small town. I feel like I was surrounded by agriculture all my life growing up. And I think that, ties in with the small and rural lifestyle.
And so as you're thinking about Kansas agriculture and rural communities, what does that mean to you?
Well, you just said it. I think agriculture is about community. I think it's what builds community for Kansas, and it's what makes our rural lifestyle work. Obviously, agriculture is a huge powerhouse in Kansas and in the industry, and so we're going strong, and I think that's what brings us all together.
Thinking about people in your rural community or other rural communities across the state or country, or those involved in the agriculture industry, what would you like to share with them?
I would say be curious, ask questions in order to get involved and be able to support. There's so much to learn about agriculture, especially if you're not directly involved with it in your community. Just asking questions, getting involved, and finding ways to help out. Everybody's unique and has different set of skills and tools that we can bring to the table, and that's what helps us all move forward. Anything else you'd like to share? Kansas is just a wonderful place to live. We've got a lot of really cool communities in Kansas, and that's all backed by agriculture. We're surrounded by it, and that's what builds us up every day. And so I think it's important to recognize that and understand how well it helps us all move forward. And our final KARL class participant we're talking to today is Eli Svaty with the Seward County Development Corporation. Eli, as we're celebrating Ag Day and continue to with your other classmates, what is your involvement in agriculture?
Well, I grew up on a family farm just south of Ellsworth, Kansas, and then had the opportunity to move to Liberal, Kansas in 2006, where I taught high school English, and now I work with a development corporation down there doing economic development. So a lot of what we do in that community is try to bring in additional opportunities for value-added agriculture. Eli, what do you and the Seward County Development Corporation do? Well, it's both economic and community development. Yes, we're trying to bring in industries. We're trying to expand the industries that we have, but then it includes everything else. It's what kind of livability do we have? What kind of housing options do we have? What kind of childcare options do we have? Everything that really makes the community thrive. So, Eli, as you're working with others in the community and other businesses and agriculture, what does Kansas agriculture mean to you? Well, it's a place for opportunity. I mean, it allowed us and the rest of my family to go from, bohemian dirt farmers to working across the state and having opportunities like this through the KARL program to see new parts of the world. And so there's great opportunities even in rural communities for people to still have those opportunities to go from just a farmer to a great life with a great family and a great community. Eli, what would you like to tell other people in agriculture and rural communities? So
The struggles are not unique. I mean, as difficult as it is sometimes in those rural communities to think that, gosh, if we just had more housing or if we just had more workforce, don't feel like you're on an island there. We are half a world away in Spain right now, and we're talking to farmers and we're talking to ranchers, and they're fighting the same battles. They don't know what the succession plan is going to be for their farms. They don't know if they're going to have enough employees. They don't know if it's going to rain. So as much as we struggle with those things in Kansas, the rest of the world struggles too. And so if we can use that and leverage each other and kind of find new ways to adapt to that, I think we can all be more successful.
Eli, I appreciate you helping us celebrate agriculture today.
Thank you.
That was Eli Svaty with the Seward County Development Corporation, and he was also joined by Mark Palen with the AGCO Corporation, Andrea Krauss with John O. Farmer Incorporated, Kari West with Evergy, and Adam York with the Kansas Sorghum Producers. This current KARL class is wrapping up their international travel this week as they are currently in Spain. If you'd like to learn more about KARL, you can do so by going to www.karlprogram.com. That is www.karlprogram.com. I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. I would also like to give you a reminder as we are talking about the KARL program that if you'd like to be a part of the next class, applications are due April 1st, so that is coming up very soon. People are able to nominate someone else if they do think they would be a good fit for the KARL program. You can find the preliminary schedule for this upcoming class by once again going to the KARL program website. I will, of course, link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break for our next segment, I would like to once again wish you happy Ag Day, and I hope you stick around for the rest of today's show. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing crabgrass for cattle. And to talk about it, we're joined by K-State Beef Systems Specialist Jaymelynn Farney. Jaymelynn, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Sure glad to be on the program.
Jaymelynn, talking about crabgrass today, which is something that most people consider a weed.
That is correct. Now, we can't talk about this without describing what is a weed. By definition, it's an undesirable plant growing at the time. And so for crop producers, crabgrass is a weed because it can suck up the valuable nutrients for their row crop. But for cattle purposes, we found that it's a very high quality nutritive feed for the animals. And so it's not a weed for us per se. We actually try and use it as a grazing deal. But it could be considered a weed if you got alfalfa for hay. So it's all in your perspective.
And so as we're thinking about using crabgrass as something beneficial for cattle producers, how would they go about doing that?
One thing is it is very highly nutritive, particularly in regards to protein concentration. And it is very, very responsive to fertility. For example, 50 units of nitrogen gives you 1 ton of hay. So it's something that's very, very prolific, and you can have quite a bit of tonnage from there. It's a very fine-stemmed plant, so for those of you who are wanting to use it either as a grazer or as a hay, and you're in the southeast Kansas where normally we get a lot of rain and moisture, that finer stem makes it faster to dry down and easier to put up for your hay. So a lot of really good benefits from it. So if you're looking to go ahead and establish it, it works very well in any crop fields that you're wanting to turn back into pasture ground. You know, there's probably quite a bit of crabgrass already out there, so you could just use it voluntarily. But a good, clean area, the more soil surface it has, the quicker it'll get germinated and be able to go. It's a small seed, so you only want to put it about 1/4 inch deep. And you don't put very much seed out, 4 to 6 pounds of live seed per acre. And so it's one that we're looking at now to order your seed, but you do not put it in the soil till it starts warming up. It needs to be at least soil temperature greater than 55 degrees Fahrenheit.
So something that really gets established and going pretty quickly then?
It does. Within several weeks, you can be able to go out and graze on it. Crabgrass is an annual forage. You do need to seed it every year. Now, luckily, there are some folks, and Oklahoma State's the one who's kind of found this out first and has promoted it, kind of turning it into a perennial in regards to the fact that you can let the plant go to seed, knock the seed heads off, scuff it up, get a little more seed to soil contact, and let it reseed for the following year. And so that can give you, that option. Otherwise, you can go out and broadcast. Drilling, you get a better stand, but you could broadcast, run a cultipacker over it, etc. But that just provides you with the chance to be able to potentially turn that crabgrass pasture into a perennial.
And for people who are thinking about using it to graze their cattle with, do they need to make sure they supplement or include anything else as those cattle are grazing?
So you have to strategically graze that crabgrass at the right time. It is a warm season, and as soon as it gets cold, that plant dies. I mean, there is very little nutritive value. So typically we say that you can have really good grazing in our southeast corner where I do the research on it. First part of May to about September 15th, maybe the 1st of October. After that, it's just not going to support your animal production. And if you want to get seed production, you got to pull your cattle off earlier than September. But during its growing phase, when it is really, really high nutritive value, it's not uncommon for me to see greater than 12% crude protein on a dry matter basis for this. So protein is definitely not our limiting nutrient on crabgrass. If you're looking to increase gains for your animals, energy might be something you'd be contemplating adding. Some corn or milo, oats, something like that. But on some of my research with my heifers, we have fall heifers that as soon as we wean them, in April, we go on to crabgrass pastures, and we see with just a free choice mineral that those heifers will consistently gain at least 1.5 pounds average daily gain, all the way up to 1.8.
How many cattle should maybe go in an area?
That is a great question, and of course, that deals back to determining your stocking rate. What is your growth and performance, etc. And one thing that we have started doing at our research facility with our crabgrass is we've started rotationally grazing that crabgrass, going and moving between paddocks every 14 to 28 days. And when you do that, you can be able to increase your stocking rate almost 20% and be able to maintain sufficient forage out there. And so what we typically see in our Southeast Kansas research facility, with 50 units of nitrogen applied 2 different times during the summer, we are running one 600-pound heifer on 0.8 acres all summer long using rotational grazing.
And for producers who are wanting to hay that crabgrass, what are a few things they need to consider?
So, I'd already mentioned it is very responsive to fertility. And so that is something that will give you the best bang for your buck with your crabgrass, is not mowing it too short, still keeping a mower canopy height, start at about 6 to 8 inches. You can go ahead and mow it then or graze it, but do not go shorter than a stubble height of 3 to 4 inches. And once you mow it, go ahead and put another 50 units of nitrogen on. And if you do that after each of your haying events, you can get 3-4 ton potential of hay, depending on weather, But it is one of those that's very, very responsive. And a lot of the work shows that, especially, out of Oklahoma, we have some data here at K-State as well. But out of Oklahoma State, they see that you remove it, you add your fertility back in, and it'll end up continuing to produce for you over time. We've done some work looking at split application of fertilizer, do some at the beginning of the season, in the middle, after every cutting, or just all up front. And we do find that the split application is the more economic option for you. And for grazing, I also recommend split application of your fertilizer. And that's what we do. We'll put 50 units nitrogen in May, and then another 50 units nitrogen in June, July.
Should they go ahead and test that crabgrass once they have it baled?
Of course, we always recommend that once your feed is in the bale, prior to you feeding it to your animals, get a nutrient analysis on it, not just protein. Get a dry matter, a protein, an energy value. Those will be very, very important for you. And I almost guarantee if you put it up right, you're going to have sufficient protein and you're going to be lacking in your energy. But you never know if you don't test it.
As we're thinking about this crabgrass, why might you encourage a producer to even look into it?
It really fits in to a bunch of different systems. And that's where the crabgrass, I see it being a useful utilization. So if you're in an area that has a lot of cool season perennials, like Southeast Kansas, we have fescue. Northeast Kansas, you have brome. Those are cool season perennials. They go dormant. They don't have as good a quality forage during the summer. You can use crabgrass to fill that hole. A lot of folks who are utilizing their crop ground to the greatest degree, they'll put rye or wheat in the winter. That's your cool season annual. And then they'll put crabgrass as the summer. And they'll just kind of rotate those crop acres back and forth between those two grass species and run lots and lots of stocker cattle. And that gives you, the ability to potentially graze 10 months out of the year with those that rotation. So it's more kind of a filler in your system. And why I say it's more of a filler than you rely on it, all annuals are more sensitive to drought versus your perennials. If you don't have rain, your annuals will absolutely not grow. If you don't have rain, your perennials aren't going to grow as well, but they're still going to grow a little bit. They already have that root base to go. And so it's a little more sensitive, a little more tricky. And so it's one of those that you use it more as a stopgap instead of a permanent system in your operation.
Jaymelynn, if people would like to find out more information about this, where can they do that?
So we have a couple of publications listed online with K-State, and it is in the K-State bookstore, as well as you can find a publication written by Dr. Bruno Pedrera and myself that is in the Agronomy E-Update, the December of 23 issue. And, I hate to promote another university, but Oklahoma State really has led the charge for crabgrass. And they are the ones who have developed a majority of the varieties of grazable crabgrass out there. And so if you're really interested in looking at varieties in particular, Oklahoma State University has the most variety trials in regards to crabgrass.
Jaymelynn, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about crabgrass for cattle.
Thank you. Anytime.
That was K-State Beef Systems Specialist Jaymelynn Farney. I will link some of the resources that she mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. There are a number of steps employees must follow to maintain the health of the herd, including the milking routine. When a standardized procedure is in place, it makes it easier to train new employees and reduces the risk of upsetting the cows. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk explains how to put together a perfect milking routine.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning the perfect milking routine for your dairy herd. As we look at harvesting milk on our dairy farms, it's very important that we have a set procedure that all of our employees follow. So how do you get that set up, and what are some of the important things that you need to consider in setting this procedure? Well, number one, how do you value training? On many of our dairies, we maybe don't do the best job of training people as they come into the milking crew. Sometimes we depend on existing milkers to train the new workers as they come into the team, and that can work, but what kinds of habits are they starting to develop as they are trained by our experienced workers? If we haven't done a very good job of standardizing the procedure for those employees, it's going to be hard for them to train new workers with the same routine. There will be variation. That can cause some problems for your cows. So what are some key things that I think you need to consider as you put together that perfect milking routine for your dairy? Number one, we need to pre-dip, and that needs to be effective and cover the entire teat. Many farms have switched to the foam types of pre-dip, and that does seem to help with coverage. It's also important that the pre-dip be applied before we try to strip. With stripping, we need to make sure that we get at least 2 good streams of milk out of each teat. And once that is done, it is time now to remove the pre-dip. From the time the pre-dip is applied until we actually remove it, we need about 30 seconds for kill time. It's important that that be observed as we train new milkers and that they understand that this is needed to kill bacteria. Once the pre-dip is effectively wiped away, it's time to attach the unit. Now, this is something that is very important. When we attach the unit, how long should it have been since the animal was stripped? Ideally, we want to have between 90 and 120 seconds between the stripping of the cow and the attaching of the unit. Why is that? We want milk letdown to occur very quickly once we attach the unit. Peak milking should probably occur about 15 to 30 seconds after attachment. And within the first 2 minutes of milking, we should remove over 50% of the total milk for that milking. Could range anywhere from about 50 to 60% depending on the animal. Even high-yielding cows should milk out in under 5 minutes. So if we do a good job of prepping, and if we have enough time for milk letdown in between the stripping of the cows and the attaching, we should see a consistent flow of milk once the unit is attached. We want to avoid what we call bimodal flow, or an increase in flow and then a decrease in flow, followed by an increase in flow. As we have increases and decreases in flow during the milking process, this creates additional issues with teat end health, as we're not milking cows out as fast as they could be, and we can also sometimes have dry milking or no milk flow during the middle of milking, which is very difficult on the animal and will cause increases in teat end scores, resulting in higher mastitis levels. So as you think about putting together your ultimate milking routine that would be perfect on your dairy, it's important that you take into consideration these items that have been mentioned. It is also important that you put value into the training of your milking team. It's important during the training process that you also allow suggestions from those that are actually doing the milking. Sometimes they actually do have some very good insight that we need to consider as we develop our milking procedure for the farm. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to continue to develop the perfect milking routine for their dairy farms.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.